what's up next for Prod Plan on the development roadmap? What are we adding to the software next and focusing on? And that is inventory. When we talk about inventory, it's not finished good inventory. We're talking about raw material and components, what you use to make your finished goods. Prod Plan is a software suite for manufacturers to do production scheduling. So if you're a planner, a scheduler, plant manager, reach out to me. If your job is to do master production scheduling or anything in between there, reach out to me at natesolves.com. We'd love to have you on the beta, get your feedback. Biggest thing I hear from plant managers is what affects their scheduling and what they can run when is going to be supply chain issues, stocking out of things that raw materials and components. We love our long range plans, but when you run out of a particular, if you receive a shipment that's less than you expected or later than you expected, you're going to have to adapt. So long range is great. We've done a lot of work production on Prod Plan, and we have this really awesome stuff you can do. And the whole idea is thinking about things differently in the sense of, instead of having these inputs to your plan, inputs to planning process, those things should be outputs. And what I mean by that is your factory should operate, look like, and act like your schedule dictates. So your schedule should determine what your factory looks like and acts like, instead of the other way around. So things that you think of initially put as constraints to your plan should actually be outputs. So that's where long range planning comes in. When you say, all right, we run on these days for this long and we staff this much and we run these machines, now go make me a schedule. That's great, but what if you thought a little bigger? And in the long range, you could say, what do we want for this particular month? If we want to think of our organizational objectives like profitability, let's minimize, and the things you have control over, minimize labor cost, maximizing the throughput of particular high margin products. You want the schedule to tell you, run on these days. Here's how the optimal shift lengths. Here's when you should run overtime and when you shouldn't run overtime, and run these machines, prioritize these products, front load is run as much as you can for this product on this machine. So everything that's long range. It's great, super powerful. But when it comes to day to day or week to week, when you run out of stock on a particular item, it's going to throw, or potentially could throw, a wrench into the whole schedule. So the goal is to adapt to those things as they arise and do your best going forward with what you know. So what does Prod Plan right up front, it's going to generate a requirement of raw materials requirement for the month. So when you run a schedule, you get an optimal schedule, you like that schedule, you run it by leadership, everybody signs off, looks great. It runs it past your current inventory levels and your projected arrival dates of shipments. It knows when you're going to be getting new things in, and it knows how much you have on hand now. So it rolls all that in, takes that onto account when it runs optimization. And then it will inform what we need to, how much more of what raw materials we need to procure at the beginning of the month in order to make the schedule possible. So right up front, you get a list of things. What do we need to procure for the month in order to make this schedule happen? So then the folks in charge of purchasing can go take that list immediately and go make sure those are available. And it takes into account things that are recurring. So if you don't have the capacity to store everything for the month, maybe you're talking about hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pounds or gallons of something, and you just don't, it's not practical to have everything up front. Optimization, the engine will take into account, okay, we get a shipment every week, some sort of recurring supply, and we don't want to schedule over and above that. These sort of things that are fixed, we talk about, these are the high risk things where it's either particular, maybe a customer supplies it, or it's just of limited supply in general. It's risky because it's one of those bottleneck components where everything, it seems like you could run as much as possible. You could always run out of this. As much as you get in of this particular component, you can run out. It seems to be there's some component tends to always be that bottleneck, especially when you have a tremendous demand above and beyond what you can, and you're able to supply as far as manpower and machines go. It lands. A lot of times the bottleneck ends up being raw materials, and a particular raw material. So you have a idea of what your current levels are, and you can project out when we are expected to receive. Then that particular quantity. Then you run your schedule, generate a schedule on the best knowledge you have at that moment, and then as more information comes in, rerun the schedule with the goal of minimizing the disruption of the rest of the schedule of the other parts of the factory. So if you run out of a particular component, that's going to affect short-term and mid-term of that particular product group on that particular machine. But if you have other parts of the factory that are running a whole different product group, they don't need to come in the next day and have their schedule shifted because you reran your schedule. And hey, look, it's maximizing our profitability over the next 3 weeks based off of this new information, and everything looks great, but it's completely shuffled the deck on the entire factory. So there's a tremendous value in consistency when you're as you're adapting, and you may be adapting daily or weekly as things arise. In fact, I almost guarantee that this thing needs to be run daily because you're taking into account issues that happened previously, maybe on the last shift or second shift. You're coming in on the first shift and you're rerunning this, and you're saying, well, here's how much we filled. It was this much more or this much less, or we had downtime. There's going to be a constant recalibration of the schedule, and there has to be a real focus on minimizing disruption to that long run. So don't mess with parts of the factory that aren't directly impacted. So that's a challenge. Right up front, we've already incorporated a lot of as far as the back end constraints for inventory, we have ways to incorporate that into the actual planning system. But what we need to do now, what we're going to focus on now, is how do we do this short range replanning by taking, hey, we love this long range plan, and we don't want to shuffle it and reshuffle it and change the entire thing every time something small minor comes up. So minimizing that disruption going forward as we adapt.